World War I, the world's deadliest conflicts in human history. The First World War was one of the deadliest conflicts in human history, with over 40 million military personnel and civilians losing their lives. Trench soldiers faced unimaginable hardships, including disease, hunger, rats, awful smells, and the constant fear of death. Today, we will explore the experiences of World War I trench soldiers. But before we begin, remember to subscribe to the History Reel and share your suggestions for future historical topics. During the period from October 1914 to March 1918, British, French, German, Russian, and Ottoman forces engaged in trench warfare. Trenches were deep, narrow paths dug into the ground at the front lines of battlefields, providing cover from enemy fire. However, the unsanitary conditions in the trenches led to many deaths. The zigzag design of the trenches offered strategic advantages, such as better vantage points and hiding spots. Soldiers faced various challenges in the trenches, including trench foot caused by prolonged exposure to wet conditions. Despite efforts to prevent trench foot, many soldiers suffered from this condition. Additionally, the unsanitary environment in the trenches made soldiers susceptible to illnesses like trench fever spread by lice. Rats were also a common problem, feeding on soldiers' rations and even biting them while they slept. The use of chemical weapons during World War I, starting with the chlorine gas attack in 1915, added a new level of terror to the conflict. Gas attacks caused severe injuries and fatalities, further increasing the dangers faced by soldiers. Soldiers rotated in and out of the trenches, spending limited time there to manage stress. Some soldiers engaged in activities like repairing trenches or visiting brothels during their time away from the front lines. The extreme stress of trench warfare led to psychological issues among soldiers, with many experiencing anxiety and panic attacks. The term shell shock was used to describe these psychological wounds, which we now recognize as post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. During World War I, many soldiers suffering from shell shock were sent to convalescent homes to recover. The term shell shock was actually coined during this time. Some soldiers with the condition were even put on trial and executed for military crimes like desertion and cowardice. In fact, 266 British soldiers were executed for desertion, 18 for cowardice, and others for various offenses because PTSD was not properly understood. Trench food during World War I was terrible, but necessary to keep the troops going. The British Army employed 300,000 field workers to cook and supply food, which mainly consisted of small rations of boiled beef, bacon, vegetables, and bread. Soldiers had to get creative with stale bread by adding ingredients like potatoes, onions, and raisins to make a soup. Flour shortages led to bread being made with dried ground turnips, and the main meal became pea soup with horse meat. Despite the challenges, soldiers found solace in the alcohol they received. Life in the trenches involved a lot of waiting and boredom, which officials feared would lead to trouble. To combat this, soldiers were encouraged to be creative, leading to the production of trench magazines like The Wiper's Time, filled with poems, essays, and jokes. The first Christmas of World War I in 1914 brought a temporary truce between British and German soldiers, who exchanged gifts and played football in no man's land. However, the peace was short-lived as fighting resumed the next day. In the following years, truces were less common due to orders from high command prohibiting them. World War I also had a lasting impact on language, with soldiers creating slang terms like potato mashers for enemy grenades and basket case for injured soldiers. The blending of nationalities, languages, and backgrounds in the trenches led to a unique glossary of military slang. Overall, being a trench soldier in World War I was a challenging and often grim experience. If you want to learn more about this period in history, check out some of our other videos from History Reel.